Today we'll be in Luke chapter 12, and we'll be covering verses 16 to 21. Now, today's passage will be the parable of the rich fool. Now, in yesterday's devotional, where we were covering verses 13 to 15, Jesus was preaching before a crowd when a man came forward, telling Jesus to make his brother share his inheritance with him. But Jesus took this moment to warn about covetousness and how we should never make our lives about material possessions and wealth. But here in the following verses today, he's now going to use a parable to expand upon that idea. So let's start here with verses 16 and 17. So here it says, "Then he spoke a parable to them, saying, The ground of a certain rich man yielded plentifully. And he thought within himself, saying, What shall I do, since I have no room to store my crops?" So here we see in this parable a rich man who's in charge of a great field that's full of crops, giving this man a great deal of wealth. So he's obviously a man that's worked hard all of his life and is now reaping the fruits of his labor. And yet in verse 17, he says, "What shall I do?" So despite all of his hard work and all the wealth he's acquired over the years, he still has this great anxiety. So this shows that despite his abundance, he's still worried about what to do with all of his crops. So here we see the reality of what it's like to be rich in a worldly sense, but not in a spiritual sense. Part of why we want to be rich ourselves is because we think having a ton of wealth will get rid of all of our problems and all of our worries. But as we see here with this rich man in the parable, it doesn't. In fact, obsessing over wealth at the expense of everything else in our lives just becomes another form of idolatry. And just like any other false idol, wealth promises too much and always comes up short. Now, that doesn't mean having wealth or being rich is a bad thing in and of itself, but centering our lives around being rich and having a lot of wealth, that is a problem. So the rich man here has centered his life around being rich. So let's continue in verses 18 and 19 to see how he's going to deal with his anxieties. So he said, "I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there I will store all my crops and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have many goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry." Now the rich man has found a solution to his problem. What he's going to do is he's going to tear down his current barns and build bigger ones, which will give himself peace, knowing his goods will be protected for years to come. And in the meantime, he can relax and he can enjoy himself, knowing he's done everything he can to provide for himself. So this is a common way for us to ease our anxieties in the moment, but only in the moment. Well, as long as I do everything according to my plans, everything will work out perfectly. But let's see what God has to say about that in verses 20 and 21. So Sarah says, "But God said to him, Fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then whose will those things be which you have provided? So is he who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God." So here we see the heart of the parable. We can't rely on our wealth and our own plans for our lives because that all can be gone in an instant. So here God tells this rich man, this rich fool, that his time is coming to an end soon, and he has no one to leave his treasures behind to. He focused too much on himself throughout his life, and now he's going to lose it all. So this is the story of a man that forgot where his real treasure is, in heaven with the God that blessed him with all he treasured in life to begin with. So my prayer for you all today is this: know where your treasure truly lies. It's important to provide for yourself and for your loved ones here on this earth, but at the end of the day, what really matters is how you treasure your life with God and all that he's blessed you with. And I'd like to leave you all with this final verse from Proverbs 15, verse 16. So it says here, "Better is a little with the fear of the Lord than great treasure with trouble." So thank you very much for watching.